The smell of antiseptic still clung to the air, but nothing about that moment felt sterile. I was lying there, vulnerable, every sound of the hospital echoing like a reminder that I wasn't in control. And then she leaned down, her lips brushing mine, soft, certain, electric. My heart skipped in shock, in fear, in longing. But it wasn't just the kiss that left me reeling. It was what she said right after, words that turned my entire world upside down. Words that forced me to question everything I thought I knew about recovery, about trust, and about myself. This is not just a story about a hospital room. It's about how one unexpected moment of intimacy can change the direction of your life forever. Stay with me, because what happened after that kiss will make you wonder how far you'd go when your heart collides with the impossible. And before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and hit that like button. Because the story you're about to hear proves that sometimes healing doesn't come from medicine, it comes from love. The first time I noticed her was not during some grand moment, but in the quiet routine of a morning check. I had been in the hospital for 2 days after a sudden accident left me with a fractured arm and bruises across my body. The fluorescent lights above felt merciless, and the endless parade of staff made me feel like just another file in the system. But when she walked in, something shifted. Her name was Elena. She wasn't much older than me, maybe in her early 30s, with auburn hair tied neatly into a bun and eyes that carried a kind of calm determination. While most of the staff seemed hurried, distracted by charts and alarms, Elena moved with patience. She greeted me with a warm, "Good morning, how are you holding up today?" And the way she said it didn't sound like a formality. It sounded like she actually wanted to know. At first, I kept my guard up. Hospitals weren't places where you formed connections. You checked in, got treated, and prayed you'd leave soon. But Elena had a way of softening that sterile atmosphere. She adjusted my pillows more carefully than she needed to, asked if the fluorescent light above my bed was too harsh, and even brought me an extra blanket when she noticed I shivered in the night. "You look like you don't trust this place yet," she said softly one morning as she adjusted the four-line. I half smiled. "Is it that obvious?" She tilted her head, her lips curving into the kind of smile that felt disarming. "I've worked here long enough to see when someone feels caged." Her words stuck with me. That was exactly how I felt. The hospital wasn't just walls and monitors. It was a place that magnified my fears and stripped away my independence. And yet, Elena's presence made that cage feel less unbearable. Over the next few days, our conversations grew longer. She'd ask about my favorite books, the music I listened to, even what I missed most about being outside. I found myself opening up more than I intended. I told her about my fear of driving again after the accident, about the loneliness that sometimes gnawed at me when the visitors' hours ended and silence took over. Elena listened. Really listened. She didn't try to fill the space with false reassurances. Instead, she offered fragments of herself. She admitted she loved playing the piano late at night, though she hadn't had time for it in years. She confessed that the job often left her drained, but seeing patients slowly heal was the reason she stayed. It was in those moments that I began to notice the subtler details, the faint freckles across her cheeks, the way her voice softened when she leaned closer to explain a procedure, the quick flicker of humor in her eyes when she teased me about being stubborn with my medication. Something inside me stirred, a confusing pull I tried to dismiss. This was a nurse doing her job. I was just a patient, temporarily dependent and fragile. But each day, it became harder to ignore the current that sparked between us. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the wide hospital windows, she came in to check my bandages. The room was unusually quiet, just the rhythmic beeping of the monitor beside me. She pulled on gloves and leaned close, her fingers steady as she unwrapped the gauze around my arm. "Does it hurt?" she asked, her eyes lifting to meet mine. "A little," I admitted, though the sting wasn't from the bandage. It was from the nearness of her touch, the way her breath brushed against my skin as she worked. She nodded, her expression soft. "You're healing well. Stronger than you think." When she said that, something in me wavered. I wanted to believe her, not just about my body, but about the pieces of myself that felt fractured beyond repair. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in my head. I imagined what it would be like to know her outside these sterile walls, without the boundaries of nurse and patient. But every time, the thought felt reckless. Dangerous. The tension reached a breaking point 2 evenings later. The halls were dim, visitors gone, and most patients asleep. Elena entered quietly, carrying my evening meds. But she didn't leave right away. She lingered by the window, glancing out at the storm still raging outside. "Storms make this place feel lonelier," she said, almost to herself. I shifted in bed, watching her silhouette against the lightning that illuminated the glass. "Do you ever get used to it? Spending so many nights here?" She turned, her eyes catching the faint light. "You never get used to the loneliness. You just learn to live with it." Her tone was heavier than I'd ever heard it. I wanted to ask more, but before I could, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, the machines around us beeped anxiously before stabilizing again. Elena let out a breath and laughed softly. "Great. As if we needed more drama tonight." The laugh broke something inside me. I sat up, ignoring the ache in my body. "Elena, can I tell you something without it sounding crazy?" Her eyes locked on mine, curious, searching. "You can tell me anything." The words were on the edge of my tongue, a confession that burned to be spoken. I wanted to tell her how she made these sterile nights bearable, how her presence lit up a place I thought was only meant for pain. But the words stuck in my throat, tangled in fear and doubt. Instead, all I managed was, "You make this place feel different." Her gaze softened, and for a moment, silence stretched between us. Then she stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth radiating off her. She placed the cup of water on the bedside table, her fingers brushing mine, deliberate, lingering, not accidental. The room felt too small for the electricity between us. My chest tightened as I tried to read her face, to understand if this was real or just the cruel trick of my imagination. And then she leaned down, so close that her hair brushed against my cheek, and said in a low voice, "Maybe it feels different because it is." My heart slammed against my ribs. Was she admitting what I thought she was? Before I could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway, pulling her back. She straightened abruptly, leaving me hanging between certainty and doubt. The door closed behind her, and I was left trembling, unable to tell if I'd just imagined the whole thing. But one thing was clear: I couldn't pretend anymore. Something real was happening between us, and I needed to know where it would lead. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The hospital ward was still quiet, bathed in the soft gray light of dawn, and yet my mind was restless. Sleep had been nearly impossible after what happened the night before. Elena's words, "Maybe it feels different because it is," echoed inside me like a riddle I couldn't solve. Was she admitting to something? Was she simply trying to comfort me in a vulnerable moment? Or was it a slip, one that revealed more than she intended? I replayed the scene over and over, the way her hand lingered on mine, the warmth of her breath near my cheek, the subtle tension in her voice. Each time I thought I was overanalyzing, my heart argued otherwise. When Elena finally came into my room that morning, carrying her usual clipboard, I tried to appear calm. But the moment her eyes met mine, I knew she remembered it too. Something passed between us, an unspoken recognition that the air had changed. "Good morning," she said, her tone steady but softer than usual. "Morning," I replied, watching her carefully. She checked my vitals, her movements efficient yet slightly hesitant, as though she was just as unsure of the line we had crossed. "Any pain today?" she asked. "Only when I think too much," I said before I could stop myself. Her lips curved into a faint smile, and for a split second, the tension eased. "That's a tough one to treat," she replied. I wanted to keep the moment light, but curiosity pushed forward. "About last night?" I started, my voice trailing off. Her hands paused just for a second, then resumed adjusting the monitor. "What about it?" "You said something that I can't stop thinking about," I admitted, my chest tightening. She exhaled slowly, setting the clipboard down. "I know." She looked at me, her expression serious. "And maybe it's better if we don't talk about it." Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her. She was a nurse. I was her patient. The rules were clear. And yet, the idea of pretending it never happened felt unbearable. Why not? I asked, my voice more desperate than I intended. Her gaze softened, but she shook her head. Because lines exist for a reason. Because it's complicated. Because if we start talking about it, I'm afraid of where it might go. That fear wasn't hers alone, it was mine too. But the fact that she admitted it made me realize something. She felt it as much as I did. The following days were a dance neither of us fully acknowledged. She continued to care for me with the same professionalism, but underneath, there was a charged undercurrent. Every brush of her hand, every glance that lingered a little too long, carried weight. One afternoon, while she was helping me walk down the hall for my first bit of physical therapy, our arms brushed. It was such a simple contact, but my pulse raced. I glanced at her, and she was already looking at me as though she felt it too. Neither of us said a word, but silence spoke volumes. It wasn't just physical closeness. It was in the way she remembered the smallest details I shared. She brought me a copy of a magazine I liked because she overheard me mention I missed reading it. She stayed a little longer during her rounds when she didn't have to. She laughed more when we talked, and sometimes I caught her looking at me like she wanted to say something but stopped herself. But with every step forward, there was also hesitation. And that hesitation gnawed at me. The breaking point came during a busy evening in the ward. A new patient had been brought in after a car crash, and the whole place buzzed with urgency. I sat in my bed, watching Elena rush past my door again and again. Her face was tense, her focus sharp. She wasn't the calm, patient Elena I was used to seeing. She was fierce, commanding, and so alive in the chaos. Hours later, when things finally quieted, she came into my room looking exhausted. Her hair had slipped loose from its bun, and her shoulders sagged under the weight of the day. "You okay?" I asked. She sat down in the chair by my bed, running a hand over her face. "Rough shift," she admitted. "But he's stable now." For a moment, we sat in silence. Then, without thinking, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "You carry so much," I said softly. Her eyes met mine, and there was no mask this time. No professional distance. "Sometimes too much," she confessed. I squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to carry it alone." The air between us grew thick, heavy with things unsaid. I could feel the weight of the boundary crumbling, brick by brick, and part of me wanted to tear it down completely. "Elena," I whispered, my heart pounding, "I can't pretend I don't feel something when you're around." Her breath caught, her hand tightening in mine. She closed her eyes briefly as if fighting an inner battle, before opening them again. "You think I don't feel it too?" The words left me breathless. It was the first time she had admitted it outright. My chest burned with relief and fear all at once. "Then why keep running from it?" I asked. Her eyes glistened as she looked at me. "Because if I don't know what happens next." Her vulnerability cracked me open. The storm I'd been holding back surged forward. I wanted to tell her I didn't care about the rules, that what we had, whatever it was worth the risk. But before I could speak, the overhead speaker crackled, paging Elena urgently back to there. She stood quickly, squeezing my hand once more before letting go. "I'll come back," she said, her voice low and filled with promise. Then she was gone, leaving me staring at the empty chair, my pulse racing. And I knew then, this wasn't just attraction. This was something deeper, something neither of us could run from much longer. The chair beside my bed was still warm when Elena left that night, and I couldn't stop staring at it. It felt like her presence lingered in the room even after she was gone. My heart was a restless drumbeat, caught between the fear of breaking something fragile and the thrill of stepping into uncharted territory. The next morning, the tension was undeniable. When she walked in, the world outside might as well have faded away. She had her hair tied neatly again, her expression calm, her professional mask carefully in place. But when her eyes found mine, I saw it, that flicker, that spark she couldn't hide. "Morning," she said, her voice steady, though a little too careful. "Morning," I replied, forcing myself to sound casual, though my body betrayed me, every nerve alive with anticipation. She checked my chart, asked about my pain, adjusted the 4. Routine. But routine couldn't disguise the way her hand brushed mine for a moment too long, or the way her breath caught when I looked directly at her. I wanted to say something, to break through the wall she was building. But before I could, a knock on the door startled us. A nurse assistant stepped in, reminding Elena she was needed for a meeting in the staff lounge. Elena gave me a brief nod before slipping out, her absence leaving the room colder than it had been moments before. The rest of the day was torture. Each time she passed my room, I caught glimpses of her, her shoulders squared, her expression set, like she was trying to convince herself nothing had changed. But everything had. Later that evening, when the ward had quieted, Elena came back. She sat in the chair again, her posture tired but her eyes restless. "I shouldn't be here," she began, her tone low. "Then why are you?" I asked softly. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. She leaned back, exhaling deeply. "Because I can't stay away. And that terrifies me." Her honesty hit me like a current. I shifted on the bed, ignoring the dull ache in my side, and leaned closer. "What's so terrifying about wanting something real?" She shook her head, her eyes closing briefly. "Because I'm supposed to know better. I'm supposed to draw lines and never cross them. But with you, I feel like every line blurs." Hearing her say it out loud made my chest tighten. "So do I admitted. "I keep telling myself to stop feeling this, but it's impossible. You walk in and..." I hesitated, my voice catching. "You make me feel alive in a way I haven't in years." Her eyes softened, and for a second I thought she might reach for me. Instead, she stood and walked to the window, her hands braced against the sill. The hospital courtyard was lit with dim lamps, the trees swaying in the night breeze. "You don't know what this could cost me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "My job, my reputation, everything." I wanted to ease her fear, but I also wanted her to understand. "I don't want to take anything from you. But pretending this isn't real, it's tearing me apart." She turned then, her eyes glassy with unspoken conflict. "Do you think I don't feel the same?" My throat tightened. "Then what are we so afraid of?" Before she could answer, the door swung open. A young resident stepped inside, apologizing for the interruption. He needed Elena's help with a patient in distress down the hall. The moment shattered, leaving us suspended in the ache of unfinished words. She gave me a fleeting glance, then disappeared into the hallway. Hours passed before she returned. When she finally did, she looked drained, her scrubs stained, her hair messy. She sank into the chair without a word, rubbing her temples. I watched her, the heaviness of the day etched into every line of her face. Without thinking, I reached out, my fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand over, lacing our fingers together. The silence was no longer empty, it was full of everything we were too afraid to say. "Elena," I whispered, "we can't keep running in circles. Sooner or later, we have to decide what this is." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in her gaze broke open. For the first time, she let the vulnerability show. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight this anymore," she admitted, her voice trembling. Her words sent a surge of heat through me, hope, fear, desire, all tangled together. I wanted to lean forward, to erase the space between us, to let everything we'd been holding back finally ignite. But before I could move, alarms blared down the hall. Code blue. Elena jolted upright, her hand slipping from mine as she rushed out the door. The silence she left behind was deafening, but my heart was louder still. Because now I knew, whatever boundaries we faced, whatever risks we carried, Elena and I were standing on the edge of something neither of us could deny much longer. And the next time she came back, I would not let the moment pass unfinished. The next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elena's face, her hand laced in mine, her voice trembling when she admitted she wasn't sure she could fight this anymore. Those words kept replaying, pushing against every defense I had built for myself. When the door finally creaked open and she stepped in, I felt both relief and panic. She looked tired, the kind of tired that went beyond just a long shift. Her eyes carried a heaviness, but when they landed on me, there was also something else, something raw, unguarded. You didn't sleep either, did you? I asked. She shook her head faintly. Not really. I had too much on my mind. I hesitated before saying, about last night? Her silence was enough of an answer. She busied herself with the chart at the end of my bed, flipping through papers like she needed the distraction. But I wasn't going to let her hide behind routine this time. Elena, we can't keep pretending nothing is happening. You said it yourself, you're not sure you can fight this anymore. Her hands stilled, and she pressed the chart closed, setting it down. Then she sat in the chair, folding her hands in her lap. Do you have any idea what this means? If anyone found out. I leaned closer, ignoring the stiffness in my side. I know the risks. But do you really want to spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd let yourself feel? Her gaze snapped to mine, her jaw tight. It's not just about me. It's about you too. What happens when you leave here? Do you go back to your life and forget this ever happened? Because I don't know if I could handle being just a chapter in someone else's story. Her words cut through me, sharper than she realized. Do you think that's all you are to me? I asked, my voice stronger than I intended. You've seen me at my weakest, and instead of walking away, you stayed. You've been more than a nurse. You've been everything. Her expression softened, but fear still flickered in her eyes. She reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I've spent my whole life being careful. Following rules. Building walls. And now, one look at you, and everything I thought I knew feels like it's slipping away. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then maybe it's time to let it slip. Maybe that's the only way we'll ever know what's real. Her lips parted as though she wanted to respond, but a loud crash from the hallway made both of us jump. Shouts followed, urgent, panicked. Elena shot up, rushing to the door. I could hear commotion outside, a patient yelling, the sound of running feet. I leaned forward, straining to hear, but the voices blurred together. After several minutes, she came back in, her face pale. What happened? I asked quickly. An overdose, she said, her voice tight. One of the younger patients, she didn't make it. The weight of her words settled heavy between us. I saw it in her face, the reminder of how fragile life was, how quickly everything could vanish. She sank back into the chair, her shoulders slumped, her eyes glassy with exhaustion and grief. I wanted to comfort her, to take her pain away. Slowly I reached for her hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. Her fingers gripped mine tightly, like I was the anchor she needed in that moment. She was just 23, Elena whispered. And I keep thinking, what if I had checked on her one more time? What if I had noticed something sooner? You can't blame yourself, I said softly. You do everything you can for people, but you can't control what they choose. You've saved lives, Elena. Don't let this take that away from you. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw her truly break. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against my arm, her shoulders shaking. Instinctively, I brushed my fingers through her hair, holding her there, letting her feel the comfort she so often gave others. After a long moment, she lifted her head, her cheeks damp. Her eyes locked onto mine, and something shifted. The grief, the fear, the tension, it all funneled into a single truth between us. I don't want to waste any more time pretending, she said, her voice breaking. Not when life can be stolen in an instant. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst. Then don't, I whispered. And before I could second guess, before she could pull away again, I leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't hesitant this time. It was desperate, urgent, full of every feeling we had been holding back. Her hand cupped my face, her breath mingling with mine, and the world outside ceased to exist. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, our breaths ragged. She let out a shaky laugh, tears still clinging to her lashes. What are we doing? Finally being honest, I said. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then God help us both. The sound of footsteps in the hall made us snap back, pulling apart just as a colleague passed by the door. Elena quickly stood, smoothing her scrubs, her face shifting back into composure. But as she glanced at me one last time before leaving, I knew we had crossed the point of no return. And now the real question haunted me. What would happen when the walls of this hospital could no longer keep our secret? The days that followed felt like stolen time. Every glance, every touch between Elena and me was a quiet rebellion, a secret carved into the sterile walls of the hospital. We moved through routines as though nothing had changed, yet everything had. Behind closed doors, in whispered exchanges by the supply closet or a lingering touch as she checked my vitals, we lived in a fragile bubble where the truth was ours alone. But the world has a way of testing the very things you try hardest to protect. It happened on a gray afternoon, the kind where rain pressed against the windows and the halls felt heavier than usual. A senior nurse, rigid and watchful, walked in unexpectedly as Elena was adjusting my blanket. It was nothing unusual, but the way Elena's fingers lingered on mine, the softness in her eyes, those tiny betrayals were enough. The nurse narrowed her gaze, suspicion flickering across her face. The tension that followed was unbearable. I saw the fear in Elena's eyes, the unspoken warning that what we shared could cost her everything. Her career, her reputation, the life she had carefully built. And yet, as the nurse left, leaving behind a silence so thick it strangled us both, I knew one truth with absolute clarity. I didn't want to live in hiding anymore. "Elena," I said, my voice firm despite the shaking in my chest, "we can't keep doing this. You can't keep living in fear of what people might think. And I can't bear watching you shrink into the shadows of your own life." Her hands trembled as she folded them in front of her. "If this gets out, I lose everything I've worked for. My license, my job, maybe even my family. Do you understand what you're asking?" I reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "I'm asking you to choose yourself for once. To choose us. Because what's the point of saving everyone else if you lose the one thing that makes you feel alive?" Her breath hitched, her eyes glistening with tears she was trying hard to contain. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared at me with the weight of someone standing at the edge of a cliff, terrified of the fall but desperate for the flight. Then the door swung open, and a doctor came in with my discharge papers. My time in the hospital was over. A rush of relief and dread washed over me simultaneously. I was going back to my life, but what about Elena? Was I leaving her behind? The doctor rattled off instructions, but I barely heard a word. My eyes stayed locked on Elena, who stood frozen, her mask of professionalism back in place. When he left, I knew this was it, the moment where silence could kill everything we had built. "I can't leave without knowing," I said, my voice breaking. "Tell me, Elena, was this real, or was it just a mistake you'll bury once I walk out that door?" Her lips parted, but no words came at first. She shook her head, stepping closer until she was right in front of me. "It was never a mistake," she whispered, her voice raw. "You've made me feel things I never let myself feel before. You've reminded me what it means to want, to hope, to love. And I'm terrified, because if I choose this, I'm choosing a storm. But I'd rather drown in that storm with you than live a safe life without you." The tears I had been holding back finally spilled. I stood, wincing at the pull in my muscles, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as tightly as I could. For the first time, there were no walls, no roles, no rules, just us, stripped bare in our truth. When we pulled back, she laughed through her tears, brushing her thumb across my cheek. "So where does this leave us?" I smiled, my chest aching with both fear and joy. "At the beginning. Whatever comes, we face it together." Her eyes searched mine, and I saw the shift, the moment she stopped fighting and finally let herself believe. She leaned in, kissing me with a passion that burned away every doubt. It wasn't the cautious, hesitant touch of a secret anymore. It was bold, defiant, alive. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but in that room, it felt like the world had cracked open just for us. Later, as I stepped out of the hospital with her by my side, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing in. People would talk. Whispers would spread. There would be battles ahead, against judgment, against fear, against the parts of ourselves still learning to be brave. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Because love, even when forbidden, even when complicated, had given me a strength I never knew I had. And as Elena slipped her hand into mine, lacing our fingers together for the world to see, I realized the truth I had been running from all along. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is the only one worth making. If this story touched your heart, ask yourself, how often do we silence ourselves out of fear of what others might say? How many chances for love, for truth, slip through our fingers because we cling to safety instead of courage? Don't let your own story remain untold. If Elena and I could take that leap, maybe it's time you did too. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in love that defies the odds. Because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply say yes.